welcome to another episode of Conversations with Annie and Kate. This time we have the lovely Pia Andrews with us. Hello Annie, how are you?
Very well, thank you, and welcome Pia.
Thank you so much.
Pia is somebody I have known for a very long time. She and I go back way before even Twitter was a twinkle in people's eye. We knew each other in real life in the olden days. She is a self-described open source and data ninja who has been doing some really interesting work in government in the last few years. And she's currently the digital lead and special advisor for the benefits delivery program, modernisation program at Service Canada. And she's actually working for Canada in Wellington, New Zealand. So welcome, Pia.
Thank you. It's a global program today.
It is. It's such a good exemplar of the brave new world that we find ourselves in. It's going to be really interesting seeing how everybody else starts to join into that. So
it's interesting actually, because I was going to say the Canadian government's working from home, and will be not just has been doing that for the last year, because now of course we're in end of March 2021, but is already planned to be working from home for the rest of this year, and indeed is transitioning to, at least for my department, to a working from home as the default. So people will come into work 1 or 2 days a week, or maybe 3 days a week when it opens. So they're actually looking at shifting all of their real estate to more team places and hot desks and all that kind of stuff, because people want to work from home as the default as well. So yes, there's stresses with remote work and with COVID and all the rest of it, but it's been an extraordinary enabler for actually empowering more open and empowered teams, and that's been a really good thing.
Yeah, we're pretty much the same. I suspect that once the bean counters work this out, that it'll be done before anybody else has a chance to object.
Maybe. The key thing is though that we are all operating in this horrific nightmare, which is COVID, and it's just been interesting to see people bring their humanity to the fore, at least in the places that I'm working. So people are able to be more human with each other, which is a really necessary side effect of the world that we're in now.
I think it's a good side effect. So let's just do the thing that we do. What are we drinking? I for one am having, out of the lovely dog cup that my husband was given, a cup of Yorkshire tea.
Good old Yorkshire tea. Very, very much in approval of that. I have got a refreshing cooling tonic water, which the gin part of it will have to wait because it is still only 1:42 in the afternoon on a Monday. So yeah.
I have a bona fide Yorkshire tea as well. So
Yorkshire girl, I'm very, very happy with both of you. Well done.
So Annie, why don't you ask your first question, and then we'll
I'd love to. So Pia, we have a list of questions that we always ask at the beginning of everybody's podcast, and the one that I have for you is, what is your proudest achievement so far in your whole life? What's the one thing that you're most proud of so far?
Oh, wow. The one thing the problem is I'm proud of so many things, to be honest. It's such a difficult thing to say. So, and life is so much more complex. So I'm going to have to say, okay, I'm going to choose I'm really proud of my kid. She's a constant source of pride and joy and all the rest of it. But if I look back at, I guess, my career, I'm very proud of GovHack. That certainly was a really big thing for us to start and to see continue and to drive a lot of change and demand and communities, and the amount of people that have contacted me saying, they met the GovHack, their relationship and their social networks and everything is because of GovHack is really quite humbling. I'm very proud of GovHack. And I'm also very proud of the various teams that I've had the privilege to work with and lead. Just going on to brand new things, like we had a major machinery government change in one of my jobs a year or two back, and it was really interesting. The team that we put together were really sort of fragmented when I got them, and then by the end were really strong. And I remember there's one person saying, well, and then they got split 5 ways with this massive restructure. And I remember one of the people in the team sort of just standing up and saying to everybody else, well, it's okay if we get split because we're all kind of like saplings in this branch, and anywhere we go, we can lay down roots and continue to grow this forest of change. And that was one of those moments I'm like, yeah, we're doing it right. Like, change is not something that can be driven from one group, one person, one entity. It's about that, you know, growing people's confidence and their imagination, and seeing change take root and have its own momentum is one of the things that that most delights me and that I take most pride in, because I think been able to play a reasonable part in driving some of those sort of movements and change. And sorry, rules as code. I have to say rules as code as well, because, you know, I'm one of the people that's been driving the concept that we should have legislation and regulation available as machine readable and authentically authorized, you know, machine readable code. And yeah, that's really taken off around the world as well. So it's been also a great matter of pride in the teams I've worked with on that as well. Too many. I can't do just one. I'm sorry.
That's okay. We'll allow a list.
I think it's a testament to the breadth of Pia's career that she has all of those to choose from.
Totally.
Public spheres, Kate. You know, 10 years ago, we were doing participatory government, participatory policy development with Kate Lundy, using, you know, the internet and Twitter and wikis and all the rest of it to co-develop policies. And even today, people are like, oh, public engagement and policy development is so hard. I'm like, it's really not. It's you just need to want to do it. So it's yeah, anyway.
It's really interesting. I want to come back to that, but first I'm going to ask my question about self-care. So do you practice self-care, and if you do, how do you do it? Because I think it's kind of important in these times of COVID to look after ourselves as well as others.
For sure. So on a personal level, I mean, I work strange hours at the moment. I work effectively from 4 a.m. till about midday most days, so or Tuesday to Saturday, because I'm on a different time zone. So sleep is hard, but I still try to make sure I get enough sleep. But actually, a key one for me is I study martial arts, and part of my particular martial art is around self-awareness. And being really, really clear in of yourself, your motivations and why you do things. So for me, I explicitly make time every week to sit and think, and to just allow myself the time to plan and think and be strategic about, you know, what I need to do this week. How do I support my teams this week? How to engage in, if you like, those key things I'm trying to achieve and that my team's trying to achieve. So allowing yourself time is a key one. Otherwise you end up just being bumbled along. Like, you know, there will always be too much email. There will always be too many things to do, too many events, too many meetings. So you'll never have time. So you need to create time. You need to cut it out. You need to protect it, and you need to then live it, take advantage of it. I make sure that every day myself and my teams have joy in our lives. We have the right cadences and rituals to celebrate, to appreciate, to lift each other up, and to create the right sort of culture in our workplace so that we all leave work for the better. Because you spend so much time at work, if it's not a healthy and beneficial place to be, regardless of the importance of the work you're doing, then you end up destroying your soul. So it's very, very important to establish a really great culture and place and way of working, so that everyone is better for the experience. So I put a lot of time into trying to make sure that we've got the right culture and protocols and practices and kindness in the workplace, so that we all then practice that. And for me, and this is something I got from a cognitive behavioral therapy session years ago, like a dozen years ago, every day just finding something that delights you and allowing yourself to rest in that moment. You know, it could be just a stunning sunset or a moon or a particular flower or a scent or a memory, and just making sure that every day you're taking that moment to really appreciate and be in that moment, so that you're not just bustling along from moment to moment. Presence is key. And the amount of women in particular that I've spoken to who, when they're at work, they feel guilty because they're not at home. When they're at home, they feel guilty because they're not at work. And with working from home, it's actually twice as bad. And we've had, the kids or the partners, particularly kids, though, coming into the office with these kinds of meetings, with us all working remotely, and people feel pressured to be like, I'm sorry, but what their kids hearing is, I'm sorry for my existence. So we've been really thinking about saying, welcome the kid in, bring them in. They can sit on, they can listen in, because they'll get bored and want to run off again, but at least they're included. So when you're home, when you're spending time with your kids, be present, or family or whatever, just being present there and allowing yourself the ability to say, I'm going to not feel guilty for all the things I should be doing or could be doing or whatever. I'm going to allow myself to be here when I'm here. And when I'm doing the other thing, I'm going to be doing that and not thinking about other things. And if you allow yourself that compartmentalization of guilt, as it were, then it's actually manageable. You actually can be present with your kids, present at your work, be healthy, and actually and walk that fine line. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's important for us. So one of the rules for this podcast is whenever we're recording, whatever happens, happens. And we've welcomed kids, we've welcomed dogs, we've welcomed cats, partners, so it's because that's our life, it's something that's real. And I think that's been something that's actually been quite healthy. As part of COVID, that when we're working from home, it was very hard to have those boundaries. So we had to be welcoming of it. I just think it's really interesting. You mentioned rituals. So what kind of rituals do you practice?
At work?
Yeah,
so
your team.
So every Friday we have a showcase, and we invite people from right across our team and indeed from other teams. Like I've got about 55, it's soon to be 70 folk in my function. But we invite other functions as well, just to showcase, come and just give 5 minutes on just showing something that you've done. That's healthy, both from a transparency and a visibility perspective, but it gives people a chance to show off, to feel proud, to celebrate each other's success, to see and value and respect different disciplines and different approaches and stuff. So showcases are really helpful. We have a whole Slack channel just about thanks, and everyone sort of, gets in the habits of just, saying thank you to each other and acknowledging and reflecting and just little things like that. We have a fortnightly newsletter that we do around this digital channel. And in that newsletter, we try to put, celebrating people who are living the spirit of the culture statement, the behaviors that we all collectively built to be, how we want to operate. And so that just gives that regular reminder about how to live these tenets. And we got a whole bunch. Even with our all staff, there's a lot in the all staff that we run with my team, the monthly all staff, that just talks about just making it real and celebrating kindness and celebrating keeping things calm. So there's lots of little things that you can do. And part of that's also about just getting a consistency of just valuing the breadth that humans bring. You know what I mean? Like when people are in this job description, then it's like, I'm going to rate you on that job description, but everyone's got a lot more breadth of experience and expertise and imagination and creativity that they can bring. And when you value a human as a human, not just as your job description, it's quite extraordinary how amazing humans are and people are if you just trust them a little bit and give recognition and empowerment and invite them to be whole rather than part. It's quite an extraordinary thing.
I agree with your other point there, Pia, around having the ritual in your personal life to recognize those lovely moments when they happen, those moments of being grateful for them and sort of sitting in them for a little while. And one of the things that I've done probably for about 7 years now, I have a happy jar. And when I feel happy, I write down on a Post-it note and I put it in the jar. And then my ritual about that is on New Year's Day every year, I open last year's happy jar, read through all of the moments. And what's really interesting is when you get into a routine of this and it does become more of a ritual, not only do you get better at noticing the moments, but that you also start to sort of recognize what the themes are. What are the things that will typically put you in that sort of happy space, and just sort of align your life to that a little bit more so they have more chance of happening. Is there anything that you do in your personal life other than how do you keep it at the top of your mind?
Yeah, for sure. I guess in the personal life, some of the rituals in the personal life are honestly, a lot of it ends up coming around the kids. So we've got a 5-year-old, and it's amazing how certain things, if they are stable, just make all of our lives happier. So she knows that I get her up and get her ready for school and walk her to school on a Monday, because of course that's Canadian Sunday. And then I pick her up on the other days. And, her dad takes her to school on a Tuesday through Friday. She knows that I'm at work on a Saturday. She knows that I am available for the weekend after sort of 9 a.m. on a Saturday. Just sticking to some of those is really important, because then when she comes in, particularly if I'm in a meeting, I can be like, okay, well, sweetie, I'm still in this, but I'll be out there, at 9 o'clock or at 12 o'clock or whatever. And because she already knows that, just having those consistencies of routine. So routine has been an important one. Some of those rituals around her then. When we put her to bed, there's particular books that we love to read, and those become matters of joy for both of us, shared moments for both of us. There are certain songs when I wake her up in the mornings on the Monday, and usually on the weekend on the Sunday as well. And if I'm on a break or anything, if I get to wake her up, I wake her up with a particular song, which, is a happy song that we always sing. If we're walking along, we'll take every moment to skip, and we have like a little song that will do that. So there's those kinds of things, but then there's also training. When I train, even if it's just once or twice a week with my particular martial art, it makes me happy. It makes me clearer, calmer. I know that certain things will help me maintain my equilibrium and my thinking space, and but also knowing some of the bad habits. I know some of the behaviors that I start to exhibit when I'm not in a good place. And so being aware of those and sort of constantly monitoring for them, as it were, means that I can start to see if I'm trending in the wrong direction, so I can self-correct. So little things like that. But yeah, so yeah, and guitar. Normally I'd play music, regularly. Unfortunately, my guitar is still in Canada, so I need to get it over here. But that's all right. We'll get all that stuff over here soon.
And how's it been? Yeah, because I work for an American company, similar time zone issues. Saturday mornings are still Friday for them. Monday mornings are joyful because they're still on the weekend. How is that? Did you kind of know what you were walking into with that moving everybody back to Wellington? Has that been a surprise? Has it been easier than you thought, perhaps, to work for a company and not necessarily be in the same country as them?
It wasn't planned. So I got this amazing job with the Canadian government, and we moved to Canada. So we moved to Ottawa last February. Good timing. And we literally had 1 week in the office and went into lockdown. So then suddenly we were in a new land, living in a hotel, because it takes like 2 months to get into a house over there, in isolation. So that was hard, because of course the little one had no friends, no social network, no anything, and was stuck in a hotel now with her parents, and wasn't even within a vaguely sensible time zone even to have video chats with her little friends back in Australia, and was a bit young, was just turned 4. So when all the government started saying you need to return home, we were like, no, we committed to stay. And then we moved into a home, everything seemed to be set up. And then she decided to run a scooter off a step. And the short version is tooth lost. She's okay now, but like lots of blood, no dental services because they were closed. All the hospitals were just announced as COVID overridden. We just effectively panicked and booked flights home the next day. Like, we did talk to my employer and said, we'd already been thinking, should we stay or should we go? And we realized that we were just too vulnerable. If anything happened to me in my work and all of the international travel shut down, because back then it didn't look necessarily like that was going to happen. But we realized that if it all shut down, we would be extremely vulnerable. So it was the right thing to move for us. If we'd been there 6 months, we probably would have been fine, but we literally just arrived and we just didn't have any of those systems in place. So we didn't move exactly with that plan. So we've just made do. I just kind of embraced it as white collar shift work, and it's been all right. Because everyone's working from home, there's a certain equality in that. Everyone's challenged with it. I have studied for a long time servant leadership techniques, and so I'm used to empowering my staff and working to support transparency and openness across the team, so that everyone can kind of see where everything's at. I've always sort of worked that way. So for my team, it was a reasonably easy transition, to the point where they said they don't want to go back to work in the office even when they could, because they really like this sort of flexibility and working remotely and all that. But some other teams have really suffered. I've had people from across public services across different countries actually contact me for support. You know, my boss is saying, you know, yeah, COVID's hard, and don't worry, just look after yourself and your family, but I still want everything on the same deadlines, blah, 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 blah. And so just helping people say, okay, just meet with you. They're panicking because they're used to thinking that you're not being productive unless they can see you. Their style of management is not really particularly empowering. So, you know, just meet with them for 15 minutes every morning and say, here's what I achieved yesterday, here's what I'm going to achieve today, and they will build trust and work with you better. So there's so for us, it's been okay. For my team, I think it's been okay. Of course, everyone's still suffering the fact that, you know, lockdowns happen on a rolling basis, and so people will just have their kids home. So everyone's been really supportive and understanding of each other and that. For me and my family, it's been hard, but honestly, we feel just very lucky. We feel extremely lucky compared to a lot of people. And so I think everyone's got that sort of sense of, however things are going for us, it could be so much worse. And so, but it doesn't take away from it being difficult.
New Zealand and Australia is thinking, like, looking at the rest of the world, we're pretty good.
Yeah, the challenge is that you know, it's almost the same as I mean, it's very, very different, but there's some corollary here, some comparison with the GFC. Australia avoided the GFC primarily through some pretty good economic policies at the time. But of course, because it avoided the GFC, Australians broadly didn't understand at all what they'd missed. And so then the government gets criticised for doing things that actually saved Australia, and that the rest of the world were like, oh, we should have done some of those policies. But the people, the electorate hasn't really experienced the pain, and so they don't know what the bullet that they've missed, if that makes sense.
I know. I literally flew back from the US when the GFC hit, and I came back going, oh my God, the world is ending. And everybody was just going to Westfield shopping for Christmas and going, what are you talking about? And I was like, no, it's really bad. And they're like, what?
Well, I moved here in 2013. Obviously, the UK was pretty hit by the financial crisis, and the housing market tanked and things and stuff. I got here and people were talking about this GFC. I'm like, what's the GFC, everyone? And they said, oh, it's the global financial crisis. So, so you didn't have a crisis, and yet you've got an acronym for it. I'd never even heard of the GFC in England. I only learned that when I came here. It was sort of this weird, what? Why are you giving an acronym to something
Aussies have to shorten
go through?
We have to shorten everything. We cannot say global financial crisis. Too many words.
Too many syllables. That's not how we roll. In fact, even with GFC, it's too many. Like when I was growing up, I mean, I have a 2-syllable name, and that still got shortened to 1 syllable. I guess the point I'm making, though, is that I guess a lot of Australians and New Zealanders there's kind of almost like this weird schism happening in society. There's the people who know how bad it is, and the people who don't. And that's, I think, going to end up actually playing out moving forward. I think it's actually going to be a genuine social division, because the people who know how bad it is are the people with overseas friends, who work overseas, who used to work overseas, who have relatives overseas, who just have a different perspective. And then there's people who don't have any of that perspective, who their friends, family, and are all local. They haven't been affected. They're like, it's not even really a thing, is it? So why do we have to lock down? It's so inconvenient to have to lock down for 3 days. And you're just like, so, you know, I literally had, I mean, and I'm not living it daily, but I'm having visibility to it daily just through working with my friends and colleagues in Canada. They are living it daily, every day. People are getting it, people are dying, people are struggling with the after effects. And Australia and New Zealand just has very, very little understanding of that. So it's a little worrying.
Yeah, I was saying the other day, you know, I literally don't know anyone who's had COVID in Australia.
Oh, really?
I do not know anyone, but I know heaps of people overseas who've had COVID. Oh no, I do know one person.
I was going to say, you actually know two, but they both, one got it, so Clive Dickens, he got it in the UK, and Julie, who got it in the US. So I don't know I don't know an Australian who got COVID in Australia. I only know Aussies who got it overseas and then came home.
But everyone I know in the US has lost family members, has had it themselves, and so it's really quite interesting. I want to change focus a bit. So Pia, when you were growing up and you were thinking about what you wanted to do with your life, was this what you wanted to do with your life, or did you not know this kind of thing existed?
At which age?
Say 15 or 16.
Oh no, I wanted to be a vet.
I was so excited. I really, really wanted to be a vet.
And then I went and did work experience as a vet and went, oh God.
Yeah.
No.
I had to be there whilst the vet put a puppy down, and I was stroking it, and the vet didn't tell me that it was injecting it with it got meningitis. It really hadn't got any hope of a decent quality of life. So
they didn't tell you.
But the vet didn't tell me that they were giving it the injection and euthanizing it. And I'm sat there stroking the puppy, and he said, you've just done the brave thing of giving this animal a really lovely memory before it passes away. I went, I'm sorry, what now? I should have scarred for the rest of my life. I remember my mum picking me up from work experience that afternoon, and she said, how was today, dear? And I just sat there and bawled.
Yeah. Oh, that's terrible. It wasn't quite as bad for me. I watched some pretty awful things. I mean, I'm from a small country town, so I helped deliver a calf from a cow where the feet and nose of the calf had been, herniated for several hours and been pecked away by crows and such. And so we thought the calf was dead. And so we were pulling it out to try and save the cow. But when we managed to get it out, it was alive. And I was able to, stay with it and pat it down and, get all the crap out of its throat. So that was kind of nice. But watch surgery, I just was like, no, this is too, I can't, I'm too much of a softie. So then I wanted to do Chinese medicine. So I wanted to do, anyway, so I ended up basically switching and shifting. When I was 5, maybe 4, I remember begging my mum to take me to church because my mum's Catholic. And, and there are some, when we talk about rituals, the Catholic Church are very good at very shiny, pretty rituals. And so she took me to church, and we got there just too late and the doors shut. And I remember and so we weren't allowed in. And I had this kind of almost sliding doors moment of realizing that if I was inside, I'd be having a different experience. And I had this realization, and it's not to say it's true, it's just my perspective, that, none of it's real. This isn't true. What's truth anyway? It's all perception. I didn't have any of these words for it, but I had this, epiphany at 4. And then I spent the next 2 decades looking for truth. And I thought I'd find it in a physics degree, which of course was hugely a letdown. My particular martial arts though is grounded on a type of Buddhism called Chan Buddhism, which is kind of the mum of Zen Buddhism. And that's kind of where I've landed my happy place. So Chan Buddhism basically says, first of all, you are 100%, and this is a bit scary, you are 100% responsible for the impact of everything you do. Doesn't matter your intent. Doesn't matter your intent. And that sort of rabid self-awareness, self-responsibility, self-everything actually then drives you to go, okay, well, it doesn't matter if I'm having a bad day. If I do something that creates harm to someone, I'm still accountable. It doesn't matter if I mean well. Being accountable for the impact of your actions then drives a huge sense of, well, okay, let's make sure that the impact I have is at least one that's harmonious, that's increasing good outcomes, or at the very least not creating new bad ones. The point is, long story, I bounced around a couple of different degrees, not quite sure what I wanted to do. I fell back into IT because my mum was a techie growing up. So I always was brought up with computers. I saw IT as kind of this soulless path, just a way of making money. It wasn't what I was interested in at all. And, but then I started IT just as a fallback from trying, all these other different things. And then I found open source, and I discovered this sort of community and philosophy and realization that not just about, freedom and openness and all the rest of it, but I had this realization that the technology shapes people's lives, and that the tools they use shape their communities and their freedoms and their choices in life and their options. And the realization that as a geek, as a person, lifelong techie, that I had a accountability and responsibility to try to use that particular skill and instinct and discipline for the purpose of good. So I worked in the IT sector for a number of years, which was fine and interesting, but ultimately I don't like lining other people's pockets. And I spent a lot of that time in the volunteer community. Then I went to work for a politician because in my various studies, I ended up doing a course around Australian democracy, where I got angry, where I learned about some of the early founding policies of the Australian Federation, and realized that
we are a very bad country.
Look, we're not a very bad country. We are a country that was established as a penal colony that's never quite reinvented ourselves.
Yeah.
And it's not that we're not terrible. We're just not. We're not optimistic about human nature. It is the very structure of our institutions and our government that starts from the premise that there's very large groups of people, in the very first case, convicts and Indigenous, that they just wanted to control, because they start from a Hobbesian perspective that people need to be controlled. Whereas you go to countries where the government was established as a mechanism for lifting people up and supporting their quality of life, and it's just a very different thing. Australia has the ability to be that. We just need to get to a point in Australia where we acknowledge we're not a penal colony. We want to be something better than, and we just haven't quite gone through that yet. I think we got close with Hawkes and Keating a while back, but we just haven't really seen that optimism about the human spirit reflected in our public institutions yet. Anyway, didn't expect to go into I hate politics, but I love democracy, so it was a good chance to understand that system. And now it was when I worked in the politician's office that I realized the criticality of the public sector as a bastion, as a ballast for society, at least in these societies. And so since then, I've basically dedicated the last 10 years, and will dedicate the next few decades, no doubt, to reform of public sectors to be fit for purpose for the 21st century, and to be participatory and trustworthy for citizens. So did I expect to be doing this? No, but I did expect to be doing public good, and I think I'm doing that.
You definitely are. And I guess, you know, my only other question that sort of immediately pops up is, it must be, you know, super interesting and exciting, because you get to see, you know, how your work is making a difference to real people and real people's lives. But it also must be, I'm guessing, a little frustrating, because, you know, if I work for corporates, and the pace of change, even inside a corporate with a lot of money and the right resources, is still glacially slow. And now I'm going to guess it's pretty similar, if not worse, inside, you know, sort of public policy work. How do you keep motivated when perhaps the pace of change isn't quite what you hope?
It's interesting, you know, the realization I had a few years ago, and it's only a few years ago, is that the pace of change, and frankly, the impact you can have, the best way to scale impact and speed is by investing in people. An idea is a funny thing. If you can embed an idea, then people will naturally embed that idea in everything that they do. And then you get natural convergence towards that idea in whatever they're doing, regardless if they're paid to or not, regardless if they're working in the same office as you or not, regardless of whatever. An idea is one of the most powerful things that you can do to create a gravity, which then increases, which means that then when opportunities arise, it is natural that things converge towards that gravity. So there's a couple of things there. First of all, government can move very fast. Absolutely. Given a crisis, if they want to.
COVID was a classic example.
Yep. In a crisis, it can move very fast, and when it wants to. There have definitely been many, many, many examples over the years where it's not necessarily been just a crisis, but where the government has wanted to do something and has done it fast. But what that takes is, and the crisis is usually the thing that drives it, but it doesn't just have to be a crisis. So it's when you have politicization of the public sector that it becomes harder, because then it becomes 100% dependent on, if you've got a highly political public sector, then you only ever move as fast as the particular politicians of the day. If you have a highly independent public sector, then aspects can actually move very, very fast. So to come back to your point, how do you stay motivated? Well, firstly, by always stepping back and looking at whether things are trending in the right direction or not. number one. Number two, only allowing yourself to work in places where you can have an impact, because there are plenty of places where you can't have an impact because it's got the wrong leadership or the wrong systems or the wrong motivation or the wrong whatever. So really being quite clear about choosing to work in places where you can have an impact is critical, because even if you can't win every battle, at least you should be able to help drive the war, as it were. And the other thing is, because I work so openly, one of the things that has been a constant source of, a bit of a satisfaction loop and a bit of help in maintaining that that personal, I guess, momentum is because I work openly, seeing some of these ideas just flow and be able to take root in of themselves is great. Being able to see, Gov as a platform be taken up as an idea, being able to see rules as code be taken up as an idea, being able to see, the notion that open government isn't just about FOI, but it's about participatory governance. Seeing people, do little experiments is good. The challenge is that sometimes I can become, people are like, oh, we couldn't possibly do this. I'm like, well, we did it 10 years ago. Well, we did it 10 years ago. Well, we did it 4 years ago. Well, we did it 6 years ago. So really trying to make sure that people have trying to work with them to keep them supported towards bigger and bolder things is a constant source of satisfaction for me. And seeing, people just driving bigger, big vision is a source. So I guess the point is that you share the glory. If you share the glory, you see the glory sustained. And for me, it's never been about me. It's always been about the bigger public good. And things are trending in the right direction. There are definitely barriers. There are definitely challenges. Some of them are daily, but you create your allies and your networks and then you don't just measure success by your own success, but by the success of all of us. Does that make sense?
That's a really interesting point. I want to go back to the bit where you said, choosing who to work with. What are some of the warning signs that you look out for? Because you've got really broad experience. You've probably seen some really terrible things over the years, but you've also seen some really great things. So how do you work out when you're assessing a new opportunity?
Oh, that's my husband. Hello, darling. One of the ways that I assess is how people treat their inferiors, as it were, or or not inferiors. That's totally the wrong word. Their oh my God, my brain. I haven't slept enough. The people that work for them, like, look at how a person treats the receptionist. Look at how they treat their junior people. Look at how they it's almost like a martial arts school. When you go to a martial arts school, one of the ways that you assess it is not just by how the master works, but how all of the seniors and the juniors operate, because the seniors are usually a cultural replica of the master. So the master might be treating everyone lovely because they're putting on a show, but if you see the seniors treating the juniors badly, then you know that there's a cultural problem. So looking at how people operate, not just the boss that you're going to work to. I look for bosses who people tend to either focus as their norm on the good or the expedient. You don't tend to have people tend to either sacrifice the expedient for the good or sacrifice the good for the expedient. I tend to not work as well with people who only care about the expedient, because at the end of the day, if you do the fast thing but not the good thing, then it's not sustainable, right? So I tend to try to ask people, like in my particular domain of expertise, I'll ask, bosses about what good looks like for them, how they operate, all that kind of thing. I tend to go looking for people who I can see and trust in the integrity of. We might disagree on the substance of things, but if I can't trust their integrity, there's no point being there. I look for people who empower and support their staff, because you can't just delegate the work, you have to delegate decision-making and authority. And for that reason, actually, a lot of military people are really great to work for, because the military, they might have command and control, but they know what it is to delegate not just the work, but the authority and the decision-making. They're very, very good at delegating down decision-making. I don't know, I tend to look for people who actually, and particularly in the public service, who actually care about the public good. So warning signs are things like, well, I don't know how to play with the minister, as opposed to, now, how are we going to deal with the fact that, that there's a big difference between, if that's not what the minister wants, then we're not going to do it, which is insane. It's not how our public service is supposed to operate, versus, and there are some people in the public service who genuinely believe that the only job they have is to serve the minister of the day. The fact is that our public services have 3 jobs. We're to serve the government of the day, the parliament, and the people. And if you can't serve all 3 of them in equal measures, then you will end up with an imbalanced system. So I look for those kinds of things. And I look for someone who'll trust me, because if they don't trust me, then I can't. If they don't trust me, then they will disempower me. And if I'm disempowered, then I will not be able to empower my staff and my teams, and we won't be able to get good things done. So you need to be able to have a boss that you can trust. And if you can't trust your boss, either to do the right thing or to empower you to do the right thing, you can't work for them. You have to go somewhere else.
Yeah, that's so true.
So wise. And a friend of mine, she's called Aubrey Blanche, and we need to get Aubrey on the podcast as well, Kate. She was asked a similar question recently, and her answer was just so beautifully put. It was, if somebody doesn't give you the opportunity to use your skills and to do the good work that you want to do, deny them of your brilliance. Take your skills somewhere else, where they are wanted and where they are cared for, deny them of your brilliance.
Yeah, the challenge we have in the public sector is that most public servants have been kicked for 30 years. They have been told for 30 years that they are less than, that if anything's worth doing, it's worth giving to the private sector. This has been an existential crisis of epic proportions. And a lot of public servants truly believe that the skills they have are not transferable. And so they don't believe that they have, they believe in the work they do, they really do, but they don't believe that they have value. And so they get treated like that. By not just their bosses, by the political officers, and by, frankly, the public as well, because everyone loves to kick the public service. And yet, when the public service fails, everyone suffers. When the public service is effective, when it's politically neutral, when it's effective, when it's serving the public good, when it's focused on participatory governance and participatory policy, everyone does better from that. So the public service is a very special case in point. Where we need to rip the Band-Aid off a little bit and actually reform it to be what the people need it to be. Otherwise, all of the other sectors and all of the other mechanisms we put in place are unequal. The public service is one of those few social and economic platforms that you can establish upon, that you can then create equity on top of that.
I really agree with that, because, if you're looking at delivery of public services and public goods, we need those commons to exist and to be healthy.
Yeah,
those will end up like those very unequal and ineffective and inefficient societies that are just dog eat dog. And I don't want to live in a country where it's dog eat dog.
Yeah, and yet I'll tell you now, living in Sydney feels like dog eat dog every day. Everything, there are certain aspects about, there's definitely communities that are counter to that a little bit, but there's so much pressure to just save money, make money, and quality of life is not measured as being in of itself important, separate from or distinct from economic measures. So New Zealand put in place the wellness framework. It's not fully implemented across the board yet, but it's a nice step in the right direction of starting to measure good as being not just economic, but social, human, and natural measures as well as economic. Nepal, of course, has been doing this forever. New South Wales government have the Human Service Outcomes Framework. Until governments start measuring good as being around public good and public value and public outcomes, not just what's the economic impact or the budgetary impact of something, then it's very, very hard to drive the right outcome. But the good news is that most public servants care about that. Most public servants want good public outcomes, and most public servants will take a hiding every day of the week if that just helps hold things together just that little bit. But as a sector, it needs empowering, it needs support, and it needs to be strengthened to be not just more effective or efficient, because everyone focuses on that, but more ethical and more reflective of the needs, diversity, and values of the people and communities that it serves.
And that seems like an excellent note to end on, and an optimistic note too. So thank you very much, Pia. Thanks, Annie. Nice to see you both. And goodbye, everyone. We'll be back next time.
See you
Thanks,
soon.
everyone.